The Challengeth Grand Hall of Dorchester Academy was bathed in soft golden light. Polished chandeliers sparkled above, casting a warm glow over the marbled floor. The annual winter gala was in full swing. Music, laughter, and the clinking of crystal glasses filled the air. Guests in designer tuxedos and satin gowns moved like clockwork, graceful, poised, rehearsed. In one corner of the grand room stood a glossy black Steinway piano, untouched yet radiating silent authority. But no one noticed the quiet woman standing near the edge of the crowd. She wore a simple cream dress, modest and unbranded. Her shoes were plain flats, her hair tied in a loose bun. She looked out of place among the sea of pearls and cufflinks. She wasn't a student. She wasn't a performer on the program. She wasn't even on the guest list. Her name was Elena, and she had no idea. Her entire life was about to change. Earlier that evening, Elena had walked into the academy, holding a tray of refreshments. She had been hired as a part-time helper by the event's catering team. They didn't ask many questions. She didn't offer many answers. Nobody knew she used to be a piano teacher. Nobody asked why she stopped playing. And certainly nobody knew she had once been called a prodigy. Not anymore, as Elena stood by the back wall. Her eyes were fixed on the piano. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was the only thing in the room that made her heart ache. Her fingers twitched every time someone walked past it, as if the instrument itself was whispering her name, asking her why she had abandoned it. Then came the voice. It's not for people like you. The words were sharp, cold, and laced with superiority. Elena turned. Standing before her was a tall man in a navy blue suit with shiny cufflinks. His blonde hair was slicked back perfectly. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He held a flute of champagne like he owned the room. Sorry? She asked gently. The piano, he said, motioning toward it with his chin. You've been staring at it like you think you belong up there. Elena blinked. I was just admiring it. Right, he said with a smirk. You wouldn't know, but that's a 1935 model. Signed by Horowitz himself. It takes years to even be allowed to touch it. You're not even wearing shoes that cost more than $50. His voice carried just enough to draw attention. A few nearby guests turned to look. Some chuckled politely. Elena's face remained calm, but her chest burned. Who are you? She asked quietly. Adrien Laurent, he replied proudly. First, chair pianist, winner of the Vienna International, and Dorchester's rising star. He looked her up and down. And you are? She straightened her back, resisting the urge to shrink. Just a guest, she said. Arien chuckled. Well, just a guest. I'd be careful. People might think you're trying to sneak a performance. He walked away, leaving a trail of perfume and condescension behind him. Elena turned back to the piano. Heart pounding? That's when she felt a gentle tap on her shoulder. A young woman stood there, about 19, with soft brown curls and kind eyes. She wore a student badge on her dress. I am sorry you had to deal with him, she whispered. He does that to everyone he thinks isn't worth his time. Elena smiled faintly. It's fine. Are you a pianist? The girl asked. Elena hesitated. I used to be. Then you should play tonight, the girl said eagerly. They're letting guests perform during the open session at the end. No, Elena replied instantly. I can't. Why not? Elena looked down. Her hands trembled slightly. I haven't played in a long time. Not since ... The words hung there. The girl touched her arm gently. My name's Claire, and I think you should. Elena gave a small nod but didn't commit. She didn't want to explain that playing again might break her heart. She didn't want to relive the reason she had stopped. Asterisk. Meanwhile, Adrien Laurent was busy charming the audience with his polished performance. His fingers danced across the keys, every movement. Perfect, rehearsed, mechanical. The crowd applauded with polite enthusiasm. As he finished, he gave a graceful bow and whispered something to the announcer. The man at the podium smiled. Ladies and gentlemen, before we conclude tonight's performances, our very own Adrien Laurent has issued a light-hearted challenge. He invites anyone from the audience brave enough to join him in a friendly piano duel. People laughed. Some clapped a drie and smiled broadly, clearly expecting no takers. But then Claire stepped forward. I know someone who'd like to. All heads turned adrie and raised an eyebrow. Do you? Claire looked back toward Elena and gave her a reassuring nod. The room waited. Elena stood, frozen for a moment. Her heart thundered in her chest. The memory of her mother's hands guiding hers across the piano keys flooded her mind. The smell of old wood and sheet music. The sound of applause from recitals long past. The tears she had shed when her mother died. The day she left her hometown with nothing but a suitcase. And then something shifted. She walked forward. Each step was quiet, but powerful. She reached the stage and stood beside a dream. The audience murmured. Some frowned. Some smirked. Adrien looked at her as if she were a joke. Are you sure? He asked, mocking. Are you afraid? Elena replied softly. His smile twitched. They sat at the piano together, two sides, one bench. Adrien went first. He chose a dramatic classical piece filled with flair and flourishes. His fingers moved with confidence, spinning a dazzling performance. The audience clapped. Some even whistled. Then it was Elena's turn. She sat silently for a moment, her fingers hovering above the keys, her breath steadied. And then she began to play. Not with force. Not with speed. But with soul. The first notes were soft, almost like a whisper, a lullaby that made people lean in closer. The melody told a story of longing, of loss, of love. The room fell quiet. The waiters stopped, pouring wine. Even Adrien turned slowly, his smile fading. Elena played with her eyes closed, tears slipping down her cheeks. Each note poured out like a memory being set free. And for those few minutes, she was not the girl in the plain dress. She was the girl who used to dream, the girl who used to believe. The final note lingered in the air like a prayer, and when she opened her eyes, the room was silent. No one moved, until a single clap. Then another. And suddenly, the entire hall erupted in applause. People stood. Some cried. Even Claire had tears in her eyes. Adrien sat motionless, his face pale. The man at the podium stepped forward, still stunned. Double quotes. Well. That was unexpected. Elena stood, bowed quietly, and turned to leave. Adrien rose slowly. Wait, he said. She stopped. Who taught you to play like that? Elena turned slightly. Someone who believed music isn't about showing off. It's about showing up. She walked off the stage and disappeared into the crowd. But before she could reach the exit, she saw a familiar face, a face she hadn't seen in 6 years. It was him. The man who had ruined everything, and he was walking straight toward her. The man from her past moment. She saw him, her breath caught, the music, the applause, even the chatter of the crowd, all of it faded into the background like a distant memory. The grand hall, once alive with light and warmth, now felt like a spotlight had been turned on her heart, exposing every crack and wound she had spent years trying to forget. He was older now. His hair was a little thinner. He wore a long wool coat, the kind only expensive tailors made, and held a phone in one hand like it was an extension of himself. He walked with the confidence of someone who had built empires and destroyed people along the way. And when his eyes landed on her, he stopped. She felt like she was 17 again. He took one slow step toward her. Elena? His voice was low, but it still had that smooth, commanding tone that had once charmed crowds and judges and her mother. Is it really you? She froze. The tray in her hand trembled. She wanted to run, to vanish into the crowd like a shadow, but something stronger anger. Maybe rooted her to the spot. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. He smiled like they were old friends. I could ask you the same thing, he replied. I heard the music. I didn't believe it was you until I saw your face. He reached out, like he might touch her shoulder. She stepped back. Don't. His smile faded. The room around them continued its celebration, unaware of the storm brewing in the quiet space between them. His name was Anton Sabard, and 6 years ago, he had been her mentor. He had been the one who discovered her in a tiny town in the countryside, playing on an old upright piano in the school basement. He had told her she was gifted, special, born for the stage. He had promised her the world. And for a while he had given it to her, until the night he took it all away. Elena walked briskly toward the side exit of the hall, needing air more than anything. The cold night hit her cheeks like truth. She leaned against the stone wall of the academy, her breath fogging in the winter air. A few seconds later, the door opened again. Claire stepped out, clutching a small shawl around her shoulders. Elena? Are you okay? Elena nodded quickly, wiping a tear from her eye. I'm fine. I just needed a minute. Was that man someone you know? Elena hesitated. Yes, a long time ago. Claire stayed silent, giving her space. Elena didn't know why, but the kindness in Claire's eyes made the truth spill out. He was my teacher. He helped me win competitions. He told me I could make it. And then ... double quotes, she looked up at the stars. He betrayed me. When I refused to go to a conservatory, he wanted because I needed to stay with my mother. He said I had no discipline. Told the judges I wasn't serious. He ruined my name. I lost my scholarship. The sponsors disappeared. And then my mother died. Claire covered her mouth, eyes wide. I am so sorry. Elena shook her head. I stopped playing after that. I moved to a new country, took whatever jobs I could. And now I'm here. But tonight you played, Elena said softly. And everyone saw it. Doesn't matter, Elena replied. It's not my world anymore. The door opened. Again. Adrie Laurent walked out, his face unreadable. He stopped in front of Elena and said nothing for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. I owe you an apology. Both women looked at him, surprised. I was arrogant, he said. I thought you were just someone pretending, but you're something else. Elena didn't respond. Adran continued, his voice quieter. There's going to be a regional pianist showcase next month. Only 10 players get invited. My professor is one of the organizers. I can get you in. Elena raised her eyebrows. You want me to compete? No, Adrien said honestly. I want to watch you play again. The way he said it wasn't romantic. It wasn't pity either. It was awe. And in that moment, Elena saw something unexpected in Adrien. Humility. I'll think about it, she said. He nodded once and walked back inside. That night. Elena sat in her small apartment above a bakery, her fingers wrapped around a mug of tea. She hadn't turned on the lights. Only the faint glow from the window lit the room. She stared at her hands, those same hands that had once held standing ovations, then held nothing but empty plates and cleaning rags. She remembered her mother's voice. They can take away stages, baby, but they can't take away your gift. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You were brilliant tonight. I meant what I said. I never forgot your potential. I can help you again. Let's meet. Anton. Elena stared at the message for a long time. She didn't reply. The next day. Adrien found her outside the music building. Did you think about it? He asked. Elena nodded slowly. I'll do the showcase. Adrien smiled. Ben offered her a thin folder. This is the program. You'll be in the same category as me. We each get one solo piece. It'll be a live panel, televised regionally. Elena took the folder and scanned it, and then her heart stopped. Why is Anton Sabard listed as? She asked. Adrien blinked. You didn't know? Elena shook her head. Adrien hesitated, then said, he's the head judge. She felt the world tilt. Adrien added quickly. He's strict but fair. Elena looked at him with steel in her eyes. He's not. Fair. Adrien frowned. What happened between you two? He destroyed me, she said flatly. And now he'll judge me again? Adrien looked genuinely troubled. Do you want to back out? Elena looked down at the folder. Then, after a long breath, she closed it. Double quotes. No, she said. You sure? She looked up. This time, I'm not playing for him. I'm playing in spite of him. Asterisk, asterisk, the following weeks were a blur of music and memories. Elena practiced at night in an old church that let her use the piano for free. She poured every ounce of pain, loss, and joy into the keys. Her fingers bled. Her back ached. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. The music wasn't just sound now. It was survival. A DRE that dropped by sometimes, offering small tips or simply listening from the back pew. He never tried to impress her again. Instead, he watched and learned. And slowly, a quiet respect formed between them. One evening, Claire brought her an old suitcase. My aunt used to compete. This was her performance dress. It's simple but beautiful. And I think you're meant to wear it. Elena opened the case and gasped. Inside was a deep blue gown. Understated yet elegant. Thank you, Elena whispered. Don't. Thank me, Claire said. Just promise me you'll make them listen. Asterisk, asterisk, the night of the showcase arrived. The theater was packed. Lights blazed. Cameras hovered. 10 performers. 5 judges. Only 3 winners. Elena stood behind the curtain. Heart pounding. From the wings, she saw Anton seated in the center judge's chair, flipping through a program. He looked calm, polished, untouched by time. Ariane performed before her. His piece was flawless, full of fire and precision. The crowd cheered. And then it was her turn. She stepped onto the stage, the blue dress flowing around her like a second skin. The room fell silent. She sat at the piano and placed her hands on the keys. And just before she began, her eyes met Anton's. He smiled cold, calculating, and then he leaned to whisper something to the judge beside him. Elena closed her eyes and began to play. Asterisk, asterisk. The piece she chose was unknown to most. A composition she had written herself in the days after her mother passed. It began gently, like a lullaby drifting through winter air. Then it swelled, rising with tension, grief, and love. Each chord seemed to confess something unsaid. The room leaned in. Anton frowned. As the melody shifted into a cascade of broken rhythms and soulful trembles. The judges exchanged glances. This wasn't a performance. It was a testimony. And then the final note struck. Silence. A long, breathless silence. Then dash applause. Not polite. Not brief. A full standing ovation. Except from Anton. He sat still, his jaw tight. And then the announcers. Voice boomed across the theater. Ladies and gentlemen, stay in your seats. Due to an unforeseen complication with the judges' scoring software, final results will be delayed 20 minutes. We appreciate your patience. Elena stood backstage, breathing hard, her hands shaking. Adrian approached her. You were magnificent. She nodded, but why the delay? She asked. Adrian looked toward the judging booth. And there, through the glass, she saw it, Anton slamming his hand on the table, arguing with the other judges, and one of them was standing up. And walking out. The judges where Elena stood motionless behind the black curtain, the lights of the stage still glowing dimly behind her. The cheers had stopped now, replaced by a heavy silence that wrapped around the backstage like fog. Yet inside her, the music still echoed. Every note, every breath, every tear woven into her performance still hummed quietly through her veins, but none of that could mask the tension that had suddenly fallen over the entire auditorium. A man had walked out of the judging booth. And the one still inside, Anton Savard, was red-faced, gesturing sharply at the remaining judges, his mouth moving furiously behind the glass wall. Elena's heartbeat slowed, but the chill that settled in her chest was unmistakable. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something colder, something she hadn't felt in years. Injustice. Adren appeared beside her, holding 2 paper cups of water. He handed her one silently, his eyes fixed on the judge's box. For the first time since she met him, he didn't have that smooth charm, that confident grin. He looked troubled, like he knew something he hadn't dared say. They're fighting over the scores. he said under his breath. Elena sipped the water. Why? Because Anton gave you a 0. The cup in her hand trembled. What? I saw it, Adrien said quietly. Right after you finished, before the screen went dark. I think one of the other judges caught it too. That's why the guy stormed out. Elena blinked slowly. Her fingers curled around the cup. He's trying to erase me again, she whispered. Didn't argue. Didn't deny it. He knows you beat me, he said. He knows you might win the entire showcase. And he can't stand it? Elena looked out past the curtain again. The audience was murmuring now, restless, but still in their seats. Whispers passed through rows, like fire catching dry grass. Claire emerged from the hallway, breathless. I was watching from the balcony, she said quickly. One of the judges, I think his name's Herr Lang, he stood up during Anton's outburst and left. He went straight to the board organizers. Adrien nodded. I have heard of him. He's one of the most respected pianists in Germany. If he's defending you, Anton won't be able to silence this. But he'll try, Elena said. He's not just protecting his pride. He's protecting his legacy. Meanwhile, in a private boardroom on the top floor of the venue, Herr Lang stood with his arms crossed, glaring at Anton and the 2 remaining judges. They had been brought in by the event director, the woman named Madame Rossi, whose gray bun and crisp navy blazer gave her an air of strict dignity. You cannot give a 0 to a performance like that, Herr Lang said in a firm voice. It's not just unprofessional, it's corrupt. Anton's face was calm now, as if he had wiped the earlier rage away like makeup. He leaned back in his chair, crossed one leg. I judged it as I saw fit, he said smoothly. It lacked technical control. The transitions were uneven. She played an unrecognized piece, no historical significance, no established complexity. It was emotion over structure. Even it exposed something you couldn't control. Herr Lang shot back. The 2 other judges shifted uncomfortably. Madame. Rossi turned to them. And what were your scores? They exchanged glances. I gave her a 9, one said. I was moved by her originality. An 8, the other replied. The dynamics were flawed, but the soul unmistakable. Madame Rossi turned back to Anton. And you gave her a 0. Anton didn't flinch. Rules allow for full discretion. Herr Lang stepped forward. I'll make this public. If her score is buried by your sabotage, the entire event will be questioned. Madame Rossi raised a hand. Enough. We'll fix this. She will not be erased. Backstage, an announcement finally came over the speaker system. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Our final scores will now be presented. Adrien and Elena stood together in the wings. She looked calm, but Adrien saw her. Hand shaking. Whatever happens, he said. You've already won. She looked at him, and for a moment, the warmth in his eyes softened the cold in her chest. Thank you. She whispered. They stepped onto the stage as the announcer read the names. 3rd place, Marco and Izzy. Applause rose. A young boy, with wild curls and trembling hands, took the stage, bowing deeply. 2nd place, Adrien Laurent. Cheers erupted. Adrien smiled tightly and stepped forward, clapping politely for the others. And finally, the announcer continued. 1st place, with a revised total score after judges' review. Elena Mikhailova. For a second, she didn't move. Then, she heard Claire screaming in the back rows. Then Adrien nudged her shoulder. And then she walked. The hall rose to its feet. People clapped. Some wept. Others simply stood in awe. Elena stood at center stage, receiving the trophy from Madame Rossi, who leaned in and whispered, "We're very sorry." And very proud. Elena bowed gently. In the crowd. Anton stood with his arms crossed, his face still, but his eyes, they burned. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Articles titled, "Mystery Pianist Stuns at Regional Showcase," began to appear across blogs and music forums. A video of her performance went viral on social media. Students from music schools across Europe messaged her, thanking her for inspiring them. But one message stood out, from Anton. Congratulations, I underestimated you. I won't make that mistake again. Elena ignored it, but Adrien didn't. He found Anton outside the academy one evening and confronted him. You ruined her once? Adrien said. And you tried to do it again. Anton looked at him coldly. She chose to walk away from greatness. She chose to stay by her dying mother, Adrien replied. And you punished her for that. Anton stepped closer. You're too young to understand how this world works. Music isn't just about talent. It's about politics, control, image. Emotion is weakness. Sentiment is noise. Adrien shook his head. If that's what you believe, then you've already lost. Asterisk, back at her apartment, Elena received an unexpected letter, a personal invitation. From the Vienna Philharmonic to join their spring tour as a guest soloist. It was the dream. She had once buried in the cold ground beside her mother's grave, and now it was real. She stared at the letter for a long time, her hands trembling, but something inside her whispered that she wasn't done yet. Asterisk, a week later, Madame Rossi reached out. We're hosting a televised Grand Master duel next month, she said. We want you to play. It'll be one-on-one. No rankings. Just you and ... Elena didn't need her to finish. Anton Savard, she said quietly. He's agreed, Madame Rossi confirmed. And he wants to play against you. Elena looked out the window at the falling snow. I accept. Asterisk, Adrien tried to talk her out of it. He's not playing for sport, he warned. He'll do everything to humiliate you. I know, Elena said. But I need to do this, not for him, for me. To the girl who was too scared to fight back. Adrien looked at her for a long moment. Then finally he nodded. Then I'll be there, front row. Asterisk, the duel was held in a stone concert hall in Lucern. The audience included world-famous composers, producers, and critics. Cameras hovered. The atmosphere was sharp, less festive, more like a courtroom about to deliver a verdict. On one side of the stage sat Anton Savard. Elegant, poised, ruthless. On the other, Elena, Ikaaloda.com, steady, unshaken. The rules were simple. Two pieces, one chosen by each player. Judges silent. Audience reaction captured. No second chances. Anton went first. He chose Rachmaninoff piano concerto No. 2 in C minor, a towering piece known for its difficulty and drama. He played like a man possessed. His fingers flew, thundered, wept, and screamed across the keys. The hall echoed with his mastery, and when he finished, the applause was deafening. Elena walked to the piano in silence. Her chosen piece? An original. Titled The Girl in the Blue Dress. No one had heard it before. And when she played, the hall didn't. Just listen, it leaned forward. The melody began like a dream, soft and unsure. It spoke of pain, abandonment, fear, then it rose. Not in anger, but in strength. Each note seemed to forgive the last. The theme repeated, growing braver each time until it soared into something pure, something triumphant. And as the final note rang out, someone stood. Then another. And another, until the entire concert hall was on its feet. Adrien wiped a tear from his eye. Claire sobbed into her sleeve. And Anton Savard, for the first time in his life, did not rise. The echo of silence, that final note, still hung in the air like a thread of light floating through the darkness. Elena sat at the piano, unmoving, her fingers resting gently on the keys. She wasn't breathing. No one in the room was. The hush in. The grand concert hall didn't feel empty. It felt sacred, like something had just been revealed that no one dared interrupt. Then, the sound of a single pair of hands clapping. Adrien. He rose from his seat in the front row, slowly, reverently, his palms meeting with steady rhythm. He wasn't clapping for performance. He was clapping for truth. And then, one by one, the audience followed. An ocean of sound swelled, folding over the room like a tide. They weren't just applauding, they were celebrating something they couldn't name but felt deep in their bones. It wasn't fame. It wasn't competition. It was something older. Something human. Elena stood slowly. Blinking as if coming out of a trance, she looked across the stage at Anton Savard. He hadn't moved. He still sat at his piano, hands resting in his lap, eyes locked on her, unreadable. And then he did something no one expected. He stood. But he didn't bow. He simply turned and walked. Off the stage. No words. No acknowledgement. Just silence. Asterisk. Backstage. The tension was still thick. Elena stood with Claire and Adrien, both of whom looked overwhelmed by what they had just witnessed. Adrien handed her a bottle of water, but she didn't take it. She was staring into the distance. Quiet. You did it, Claire said softly, her voice shaking with emotion. You didn't just play, you rewrote everything? He couldn't even look at you, Adrien added. You didn't beat him with speed or strength. You beat him with something he doesn't understand. I wasn't trying to beat him, Elena said quietly. I was just remembering who I am. Adrien looked at her. You remembered. Now the world remembers too. Asterisk. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, Anton sat alone in a dimly lit dressing room. The door was locked. His phone buzzed endlessly, calls from sponsors, emails from press, outlets, notifications from music critics around the world reacting to the duel. He didn't answer any of them. He stared at the piano in the corner of the room and, for the first time in decades, didn't feel superior to it. He felt small. He had spent his entire life chasing perfection, believing that emotion was a weakness, that vulnerability was a flaw. But tonight he saw what real power looked like, and it terrified him. His student had returned, and she had become greater than him. Asterisk in the days that followed. News of the duel spread like wildfire. Music critics flooded their columns with praise for Elena's performance. Clips from the concert were shared across every platform. Interview requests came pouring in from Germany, France, Austria, and even New York. But Elena didn't answer most of them. Instead. She returned to her quiet apartment above the bakery. She went back to practicing in the old church, just as before. Not for cameras. Not for critics. But for herself. The music was hers again. One evening, she received a handwritten letter from the Vienna Philharmonic. They weren't just offering her a guest spot anymore. They wanted her as a featured soloist for their full international tour. 12 cities. 6 countries. A dream she had once buried now stood knocking on her door. Elena sat at her small kitchen table, the letter trembling in her hands, and still. She hesitated. Claire noticed something was off when she visited that weekend. You're not happy, she said gently. Why? I should be, Elena replied. But there's still something unfinished. What is it? Elena looked out the window at the quiet city street. My mother, she said. I left home before she passed. I was ashamed. I never went back. She believed in me more than anyone, and I couldn't bear to face her after everything collapsed. Claire nodded softly. Maybe it's time, she said. Asterisk. 2 days later. Elena boarded a train to her hometown. The landscape outside the window slowly changed, from bright city towers to quiet fields, small houses, and familiar hills. The further she traveled, the younger she felt. The years fell away with every passing tree. When she stepped off the train, the air smelled the same, crisp, earthy. Home. She walked through the little streets, past the old bakery where she used to buy pastries with her mother, past the schoolyard where her first piano teacher told her she had fire in her fingers, and finally past the iron gate of the cemetery, where the leaves whispered softly against the stone markers. She found her mother's grave beneath a cherry tree. Simple, weathered. Still. Elena knelt beside it. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I was so afraid. I thought if I failed, I'd fail you too. I didn't want you to see me broken. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But I'm not broken anymore. I'm playing again, and they listened, Mama. They really listened. A soft wind blew through the branches above her, scattering petals across the grass. She took it as a sign. Asterisk, asterisk, on her way back to the train. She passed by the old school building. The music room was still there. A small piano sat near the window, covered with a cloth. Elena stepped inside. The door creaked. A group of children sat in the corner, giggling, waiting for their part-time instructor. They looked up as she entered. Are you the new teacher? One of them asked. Elena smiled gently. Just visiting. But would you like to hear something? They nodded eagerly. She sat at the old upright piano and began to play a simple melody one her mother used to hum while cooking. The children fell silent, eyes wide, feet swinging under their chairs. And for the first time, Elena felt peace. Asterisk, asterisk, weeks passed. Elena returned to the city and finally accepted the Philharmonic tour. Her first concert would be in Berlin. Adren came to see her off at the station. You sure you're ready for the world? He teased. No, she said, smiling. But I'm not afraid of it anymore. He handed her a small wrapped package. Don't open it until after your first performance. She raised an eyebrow, but tucked it into her bag. The train doors closed. As she watched the platform disappear. She felt something lift from her shoulders. Asterisk, asterisk, Berlin's concert hall was massive. The night of the performance, the audience was filled with artists, producers, and young students who had followed her story from afar. Backstage, Elena paced slowly, her dress flowing like water. Her heart steady. She had chosen to play the girl in the blue dress. Once more. Not to prove anything, but because that song was her truth. As the lights dimmed and she walked onto the stage, something caught her eye in the front row. A man in a black coat. He sat with his hands folded. His posture familiar. Her breath caught. Was it Anton? Asterisk, asterisk, but before she could tell, the lights dimmed further. And she was called to the piano. She played, every note filled with grace and power. And when she finished, the applause was thunderous. Afterward, in her dressing room, she remembered the package. From Adren, she unwrapped it carefully. Inside was an old photo of her at 17, standing with her mother and Anton and her first major recital. But Adren had written something on the back in black ink. This photo was the beginning. Now you decide the ending. Beneath it, a folded note. Double quotes also. I think you should know Anton didn't leave after the duel. He's been watching, learning, and maybe regretting. Asterisk, asterisk, that night, she received a knock at her door. A hotel staff member handed her a card. From Anton. If you're willing to meet, I'll be at the empty church where you used to practice. One night only. No cameras. Just music. Just truth. She stared at the card. Then looked out the window into the Berlin night. Somewhere far off. Church bells rang. The night with no audience. Sky over Berlin was dark, heavy with the silence that falls just before midnight. Soft flakes of snow drifted through the air like ash, settling gently over the cobbled streets. Elena walked slowly, her coat wrapped tightly around her, the card from Anton Savard folded in her pocket like a piece of unresolved history. She could have ignored it. She could have thrown it away and left the past untouched, sealed away by applause and standing ovations. But something in his words had pulled at her. No cameras. Just music. Just truth. The truth, not the kind found on a judge's scorecard, not the truth painted by critics or headlines. The kind that lived in between notes, in silence. In memory. She arrived at the church. An old stone building nestled between narrow alleys. Its windows tall and dusty. Its doors left slightly open, as if waiting for her. She pushed them open slowly and stepped inside. The space was empty except for the old wooden pews, a few flickering candles near the altar, and the piano still tucked near the front, just as it had been when she first came here months ago. Before everything changed. And beside the piano, sitting quietly, was Anton. He stood when he saw her. No smile. No arrogance. Just a man. Older than she remembered, but smaller somehow. Not in size, but in presence. Like the weight he had carried for so long had finally begun to crush him. They stood there for a long moment, the silence thick between them. You came, he said. I almost didn't. She replied. He nodded once, accepting it. Thank you, he said softly. For the music, and for the mercy. Elena raised an eyebrow. Mercy? You could have humiliated me, Anton said, walking slowly toward the piano. But you didn't play to defeat me? You played to free yourself? Elena didn't respond. He sat at the piano and tapped the bench beside him gently. Play with me? She hesitated, then walked forward. They sat together, just like they had when she was 17. When she still believed in him, he placed his hands on the keys, but didn't press a single note. I've watched every video of you since the duel. He said, you've become everything I hoped you'd be. You didn't help me become this, she said, her voice low. I know, he replied. I destroyed your chance. And I've regretted it every day. Elena looked at him, searching. For a lie? But there was only pain. Why? She asked. Because you reminded me of someone I used to be, Anton whispered. Before the awards. Before the arrogance. I was you, once. He looked up, his eyes wet. And when you said no to me, I felt it like betrayal. I told myself I was protecting the music, but the truth is, I was punishing you for walking away from my control. He sighed deeply, and I've never played the same since. Elena didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to stand and leave. Another part wanted to forgive him. And somewhere deeper still, she just wanted to understand. Do you want to play now? She asked softly. He looked at her. Only if you lead? So she did. Her fingers touched the keys like old friends returning home. She began with a simple melody one she used to play for her mother during cold winters. When they had no heat and only music to keep them warm, Anton followed. Nah. With bravado, but with humility, and slowly, something beautiful began to form. Two styles. Two hearts, woven together. The music wasn't perfect, but it was true. It was the conversation they had never had. The apology never spoken. The forgiveness never asked for. And when the final note faded, Anton leaned forward and rested his forehead on the piano. Thank you. He whispered. They sat in silence for several minutes, breathing in the last echoes of their duet. Elena finally stood. You still have something to give, she said. No one wants me anymore, he replied. Then, teach, she said simply. But this time, teach them to play with their hearts, not just their hands. He looked up, and for the first time in years, hope flickered in his expression. She turned and walked away, leaving him in the candlelit hush of the empty church. Asterisk, asterisk, the next morning. Elena boarded her flight to Paris, where her second concert with the Vienna Philharmonic was scheduled. As the plane rose over the city, she closed her eyes and whispered a silent thank you to the past. To the pain, to the music that refused to let her go. Paris greeted her with rain and thunder, but inside the concert hall, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. The show was sold out. People lined the aisles. Backstage, the conductor smiled as she entered. Everyone's talking about you. He said, I hope they listen more than they talk, she replied. They will. As she waited in the wings, a young girl approached her. Maybe 9 or 10. Years old. Dark curls. Big eyes. Miss Elena. She asked nervously. Elena knelt. Yes, I watched your video with my mama. I want to play like you. Elena smiled gently and took the girl's hand. Then promise me something, she said. What? Promise you'll always play what you feel, even if people don't understand it. The girl nodded solemnly. And that moment felt more important than all the awards in the world. Asterisk, asterisk, after the Paris performance. Elena sat alone in her hotel room, looking out at the Eiffel Tower glowing in the distance. Her phone buzzed. A message from Adrien. They're doing a tribute concert at Dorchester next month, honoring the return of real music, they said. They want you to play. And guess who's organizing it? A photo followed. Anton. Elena stared at the screen for a long time. She typed back, I'll be there. Asterisk, asterisk, the tribute concert was unlike anything Dorchester Academy had ever hosted. No. Flashing lights. No gold-trimmed posters. Just music. Students filled the stage. The audience was packed with families, young musicians, and former teachers. At the center of it all sat a grand piano. Simple. Bare. Elena walked onto the stage, dressed in quiet blue, her eyes steady. Anton introduced her. No titles. No long speeches. Just 6 words. This is Elena Mikhailova. Listen. And then he stepped aside. She sat and played a new piece, one written in the weeks since. Berlin. One that held every chapter of her journey: loss, silence, rediscovery, rebellion, peace. And when she finished, there was no thunderous applause. There was only stillness. And then a single voice whispered from the back of the room, "Thank you." It was enough. Asterisk afterward. Elena stood outside the academy, watching the snow fall gently over the stone steps. A dream joined her, hands in his coat pockets. "So," he said, "what's next?" She smiled, looking up at the sky. "Maybe it doesn't matter what's next," she replied. "Maybe it only matters what's now." He looked at her, something deep in his eyes. "You changed me, yo." "You challenged me," she said. They stood in the falling snow. 2 people no longer at odds, but walking the same road from different directions. But just as Elena was about to turn and go, her phone buzzed again. An international number. A message. "This is Maestro Tetsuya from the Tokyo Symphony. We heard your performance. We want to invite you as lead soloist for our Global Unity concert. 1 song, 1 stage, 1 world watching." And then the screen showed the broadcast date, New Year's Eve, midnight, live. And leaned over and saw the message. "Are you going?" Elena looked up at the stars. "If I do," she said softly, "it won't be for the world." "Then who?" She smiled. "For the girl I used to be." The final anchor of the world stood still. As the clock in Tokyo struck midnight on New Year's Eve. Millions of screens across continents glowed with the same image, a grand circular stage in the center of the Tokyo Dome, wrapped in golden light, surrounded by thousands holding silent breath. And at the center, one woman stood in front of a piano that looked more like an altar than an instrument. Elena Mikhailova, not just a pianist now. Not just a name whispered in music halls. She had become a symbol, a quiet fire. A reminder that true brilliance doesn't scream, it sings from places that once broke us. The lights, dim. Camera zoomed. And in the hush before the first note, Elena closed her eyes. She didn't think of the crowd. Not of the millions watching from Berlin, New York, Mumbai, or Cairo. Not even of the critics waiting to declare whether this night would mark her legacy. Instead, she thought of that one cold morning in her tiny apartment where her fingers first touched the keys again. Trembling with doubt, she thought of her mother. Of the blue dress, of the girl who once cleaned tables, and wept over lost dreams, and then she began to play. This time, no known composition. Not even something she'd rehearsed. She was improvising. Every note born in real time. The opening was delicate, so soft that people leaned toward their screens just to feel it. The melody was like a memory forming as she played it, full of pauses, breath, fragility. And then it grew. She brought in chords that sounded like footsteps climbing, like someone rising again and again after being knocked down. The middle of the piece burst into motion, layered, swirling, wild, fingers flying like wind over water. But beneath the storm, the core melody remained still soft, still human. And as she neared the end, the music slowed. One by one. The layers peeled away until it was just that one thread again. The same simple lullaby from her childhood. A note. For every ache. A silence for every sacrifice. And then, with one final breath, she stopped. No flourish. No dramatic exit. Just silence. For 10 full seconds. The dome stayed quiet. People didn't clap. They couldn't. They were still holding it in. Until a child in the front row stood and clapped once. And that single clap was enough to break the dam. The crowd erupted. From stadium seats to living rooms across the planet, people stood. They didn't just cheer, they felt. Messages poured in from all corners of the world. I cried. I saw my life in that melody. She didn't just play music, she played us. Asterisk, asterisk, backstage, Elena sat alone, a towel draped over her shoulders. Her breathing slowly returning to normal. The producers wanted an interview. The sponsors wanted endorsements. The world, it seemed, wanted more Dot, but all she wanted was a moment of quiet. Adrien entered gently, dressed in black. I think you broke the world, he said with a soft grin. I didn't break it, Elena whispered. I just reminded it how to feel. He knelt beside her and held out a small box. I was going to give this to you after Berlin, he said. But then Paris happened, and the church, and Tokyo, and I guess I kept waiting for the right moment. She opened the box slowly. Dot inside was a key. Dot simple. Silver. What is this? She asked. A music school, he said. I bought it. Just a small building outside Prague. Sunlight through the windows, wooden floors, a couple of good pianos, nothing fancy. He paused. I want you to run it with me. Elena looked at him, her heart still full from the music she had just poured out. I don't want to become someone unreachable, she said softly. I want to teach. I want to sit beside kids and show them how to find their own sound. Adrien smiled. That's exactly what I want to. She took the key. I closed the box. Not a yes, not a no, just silence. The kind that holds a promise. Asterisk, asterisk, months passed. The Tokyo performance was still talked about. Awards followed. Interviews. Tributes. But Elena didn't chase them. She spent her days walking the halls of the small music school they opened together. Students came from all over the world, not because she was famous, but because they'd seen her play and believed she could help them hear their own stories again. One day, a girl with trembling fingers sat at the piano. I'm not good, she said. I mess up too much. Elena knelt beside her and whispered, so did I. But you're perfect. No, Elena said with a smile. I'm honest, that's better. The girl looked at her, eyes wide, and played Dot. It was shaky Dot, awkward Dot, beautiful Dot, asterisk, asterisk on the school's opening anniversary. Anton arrived quietly, a donation envelope in his coat pocket. He didn't speak much, just watched from the back as students played imperfectly. Joyfully Dot before he left, he looked at Elena and said, You turned a duel into a sanctuary. Elena touched his arm gently. We all deserve one. Asterisk, asterisk, and years later, when the world spoke of music that changed hearts. They didn't talk only about fame or technique or grand stages. They talked about a woman in a simple blue dress, a woman who wasn't afraid to start again, Dot to be broken, Dot to be brilliant, Dot to be both, Dot. They spoke of Elena. IKHAILV Dot, and how she taught the world to listen. Not louder Dot, but deeper.